Thank you, Storm. So I mentioned Dr. Shola has got a new book out. Here it is. It is called This Is Why I Resist. And in the book, Dr. Shola writes, racism is only perpetuated by white people and cannot be pigeonholed into a neat box. Let's see the quote, actually, from the book. There it is. And she shows modern-day examples of racism and asks us to speak up, show up, stand up for black people to end institutional racism. I started reading it, Shola, a few days ago, and it blew my mind, actually, because I felt myself wanting to disagree, but also wanting to hear what you had to say. But that sentence, what racism is only perpetuated by white people, really stands out.
It does. It does for a reason, because that's the truth. And the reason it's the truth, and I felt really strongly about, look, let's just lay it bare, is because of a lot of things that we've seen even in the past year. Every single time there's a conversation about race, racism, and race inclusion, the ongoing hard conversation starts with one of this. I mean, as you'll find out from my book, I talk about different things. But some people who want to deny racism exists, or who want to treat it as though it is not an issue, always go back to the point of, well, what is racism? Well, we are all racist to each other. I'm like, no, that's not racism. You have to understand that racism is a power construct that was the premise upon which the transatlantic slave trade was done. And racism as a power construct comes from this social construct called race. I mean, we all accept that there's only one race, which is the human race, right? Then the word race is a moot point. We don't need it. But some people, white nations, created a social construct of racism in order to push the agenda of white superiority, i.e. white superiority being they are of higher grade. This is using Winston Churchill's words now. Higher grade, a superior race because of the color of their skin. And from there stems what you see today is the unequal and unparalleled power construct which is used to fuel racism. Right. So if people really sit down, think about it, black people do not subjugate or oppress white people. That's because that is what racism is. And there is no social construct, no political or economic structure that allows black people and ethnic minorities to deny white people an equal value of life and liberty, because that's what racism does. Because if people don't understand that, let me finish this point. If people don't understand that, they will continue to push this false equivalence of oppression, which is utter nonsense.
But all I was going to say before I bring in Martin was, I know that you were on, was it Good Morning Britain or This Morning, one of our competitor shows, and you were talking about Meghan, and you really defended her, and you pointed out, as you saw it, that she was a victim of racism in the reactions to her. And then you printed in your book some of the tweets that came in, including one from James Jordan, the dancer, who says, this black woman on This Morning talking about Harry and Meghan is racist against white people. Fact. And you say that's not the way it works.
That's what I'm saying. That is not how it works. I need people to understand, because there will be people who will come up with examples like, well, what about this has happened to me? I'm not saying that all white people are racist, because all white people are not racist. No. I'm not saying white people don't experience prejudice or bias, because they do. But white people don't experience racism. They don't experience systemic racism. You know, you have examples like the Amy Coopers of this world, the lady in Central Park, and that happens in the United Kingdom too. You can pick up the phone and the word black, African, or anything associated with black people triggers a negative implication. That does not happen with white people. That's because the system and our society is based on a default of white supremacy.
Okay, that's a good place to bring in Martin. Martin, our system and our society is based on a default of white supremacy.
I think Dr. Shola's thesis falls apart on several levels. Firstly, the fact that racism only exists when white people perpetuate it simply annihilates the concept of racism anywhere else on the planet, which of course exists and is perpetuated by people of colour on other people too. Secondly, the idea that Britain is systemically racist is literally absurd. If you look at the earnings in the UK right now, Chinese people, Asian people, mixed Asian people earn more than white British people. The least educated people in the UK right now are white working class boys, and there's nothing done politically to help them. And these are people that only a century ago, their forefathers, including mine, didn't even have the right to vote. because they weren't landowners. That was very recent oppression. Now, this isn't a competition to be the most oppressed, but rather than looking for examples of division, why can't we celebrate the fact that Britain is an inclusive, diverse place where anybody can achieve whatever they want if they work hard enough? And the proof is in the pudding. That's already happening in academia. It's happening in earnings potential. And I'd like to hear from Dr. Shola, rather than how racist Britain is, how great it is that somebody as amazing as you, Dr. Shola, can become a highly celebrated academic who's on TV all the time with a great book deal. You're a huge success story. How about saying that Britain's amazing?
All right, but go on, Shola, because your book is called This Is Why I Resist, so you can't agree with that.
Correct. Now, look, Martin and I can agree on we need to celebrate. There's a lot to celebrate. But where Martin is missing the point here is that within that celebration is the ongoing racial inequality and racial injustice. You cannot be blind to it. Martin is giving examples, for instance, between nations. There's an unequal power between white nations and black nations, between white nations and brown nations. And that is also steeped in the white supremacy. Listen, Martin, I want us to grow as a country, as a nation. I am proud to be British. But I also understand that if we don't learn from our past, we cannot possibly fix what is going on. And this is why my book gives contemporary examples, because I really want people to understand. It's thought-provoking, it is challenging. I don't mince my words because this is not the time for mincing words. But if we can all get on the same page of understanding what the issues are, then we can all get on the same page of addressing what the solution is. And you, Martin, and I can work together in creating a united kingdom that is not just inclusive, but truly celebrates the best of us.
All right. Well, that's brilliantly summarized. Go on, Martin, I'll bring you back in a minute. Let's just bring a caller in. Storm.
We're going to speak to Maria now, and as a black woman, she disagrees with Dr. Shola.
Oh, you disagree, Maria?
Oh, yes, I do. I totally disagree. Thanks for having me on the show. It was really just to say that my own personal experience on two fronts is that growing up, say, when I was with other black people, if I got involved in doing certain things, certain activities like listening to classical music or going skiing or playing tennis, I'd be sneered at, saying, why are you doing stuff that white people do, or why are you trying to be like a white person? And they'd say it with a lot of disdain, like doing anything that was associated with white people was a bad thing. So I would say that was a form of racism. The other thing, too, is that within black communities, certainly when I was growing up, then I was treated worse because my skin was a darker shade. So there was a form of colorism going on. And I hung out with people, say, who had their hair straightened and lighter skin, whereas I had afro hair and fake lips and darker coloured skin. And again, that was a form of racism too.
Let me bring in Shola. That's so interesting. That's about black people being racist to each other, Shola.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the caller. So let me just explain this. The comments you received about listening to classical music, I totally get you on that. And I totally hear that. And even about the color of your skin. So let me start with the color of skin. Colorism is a real issue. And colorism, as a famous actress put it, is a daughter of racism. So black people are not racist to black people. Okay? The answer is in the word racism. And if racism, as we understand, is a social construct between races based on superiority of race, what those people were doing to you was wrong. The way they were treating you was wrong. Colorism is a product of white supremacy, because we know that those who are lighter skinned black people, their proximity to whiteness gives them some kind of preference. But when black people are making those comments to you, or, look at me, I'm dark skinned black person, right? They're not being racist to me. And those comments they made to you about white people, I've already said it. White people do experience prejudice.
So,
they do experience bias.
Martin, I see Martin shaking his head there. Go on, Martin.
No, it's interesting. I spoke to Calvin Robinson, who's a great friend of mine. He came on Unlocked, my media channel, last week, and he was saying he often speaks out, as Maria is on the line here, saying that he doesn't think Britain's oppressive. He doesn't think racism exists. And the worst forms of abuse and attack, using the sorts of words, the N-words that should be consigned to history, are from other black people who believe that he's not allowed to think in a conservative, open-minded, pro-British way, because that's somehow seen as a betrayal of his skin colour. That's what he told me. So I don't think it's fair for Dr. Shola to simply erase Maria's experience or Calvin's and say that's not racism.
She's saying it's not racism.
Being targeted.
I haven't, but Martin, I have not erased their experience. Neither have I erased their opinion. This is not the first time I'm hearing what Calvin has said or what the caller has said. I've heard this. Remember, I am black too. And when you pointed out earlier about things that I am perceived to accomplish, can you imagine what some people think of my accomplishments? My accomplishments does not erase the fact that racism exists. It is in spite of racism. It is because of those like my parents and others who paved the way for me. I worked hard to get to where I am, not because I'm special. So the point that I'm trying to raise here is, yes, there are different lived experiences of racism, and Black people experience different nuances in racism. I never take that away. I've never experienced police brutality. That doesn't mean that police brutality doesn't exist. I'm just saying that people need to understand there's a distinction between racism and anti-Blackness. There's a difference between the prejudice, bias that white people experience, but that is not racism.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get some calls. Go on, Storm.
We're going to speak to Jana now, also from London. She's also a Black woman and agrees with Dr. Shola.
Go on, Jana.
Yeah, racism is something that is structural, and it's based on white privilege, and it's different from racial prejudices, because racial prejudices are individual. We all have racial prejudice. I believe because we live in a racially divided society, we all have them, and because of our history, we all have them. And
let me show you, Jana, just not to interrupt, but just to show you a quote from the book which very much echoes what you're saying. This is Dr. Shola. All white people have and enjoy white privilege. This white privilege is what enables and enforces white supremacy. Okay? You agree with that?
Yeah. I totally agree. And what I want to ask you and the panel is this, right? A few questions. The first one is, why do you think it is that when George Floyd was murdered on camera, that loads of people, including loads of white people all over the world, were upset and distressed about it when it's been going on for years? The police have been killing black people for years. It's not anything new, and it happens on both sides of the Atlantic. Another question is, why do you think when people thought that Marcus Rashford was playing badly, he got a lot of racist abuse? Why is it that when Sainsbury's put out an ad showing a black family reminiscing with each other about previous Christmases, that offended white people? And the answer, my opinion, is that the answer to all those questions is that racism is an endemic part of the society. Certain racist stereotypes.
Of course, there'll be people watching who'll say, well, the Sainsbury's ad didn't offend me. That Marcus Rashford playing badly has got nothing to do with his ethnicity. That's a ridiculous idea, etc. So, but what you say in your book, and the phrase white privilege is so important because, Storm and I were discussing this. I guess we would call ourselves privileged. Now, if our privilege means that we are racist by definition, then that is something we're going to really struggle with.
No. So you're definitely misquoting me there.
Okay.
You have white privilege, and my book says this. Having white privilege does not make you racist.
Right.
Having white privilege is a product of the systemic racism and the construct that we have. What white privilege does, okay, Jeremy and Storm and Martin, is I want you to be aware of your privilege as a white person, and I want you to use that privilege to stand in the gap. So, for instance, if Storm and I walk into a store, there's nothing on either of our foreheads that says who we are, what we earn, what we can afford. But without a doubt, the security officer is more than likely to follow me than to follow Storm. All he sees are two women, one black, one white. Why is that?
Yeah.
We need to think, and I would want Storm, if I knew Storm or I don't know Storm, anytime there's a situation, I want people to be more aware, because 2020 showed that a lot of white people are not aware. They are oblivious to a lot of things. So when things happen in
Martin,
your presence, I want you to understand that you can use your privilege to stand in the gap and to end racial inequality.
Yes, but what you do say is that white privilege enables and enforces white supremacy, which I guess means the default setting, unless you fight it, is that you become part of it. Martin, you're shaking your head. Why?
Because white privilege theory is a dangerous and divisive fantasy, I want to ask Dr. Shola. So I've just explained for 20 straight years in the United Kingdom, white working class boys are the bottom of education. There is not a single political initiative anywhere to help them. And I know that because I've been involved in politics for many years and I've made this my work to get this brought to attention. In fact, that's resisted because we have this narrative that white people are privileged. When precisely does their white privilege kick in, Dr. Shola? Because those boys and those girls, they will never make it to be politicians. They won't make it to the top. They've got about as much likely as moving out of a council estate in Stoke or Nottingham or Mansfield as I have of becoming an astronaut. That's not white privilege.
Okay.
You're
Good
hand-picking
let
the
her
people at the
answer.
top.
Let her
You're
answer.
hand-picking the people at the top and making out that is all people. And that is not true. And it's divisive and dangerous.
No, it is not. So using your example, Martin, the working class boys who are not getting as much or doing as well in education, it's not because of the color of their skin. Nobody's saying that white people don't experience oppression, but your oppression is not because of the color of your skin. Now, black people and ethnic minorities are experiencing intersecting inequalities, which is exacerbated by the racial inequality they experience because of the color of their skin. That is the point. Nobody's taking away the lived experiences of white people.
Martin's point is, if that is true, why are young working class white boys at the bottom of the pile? If they've got less intersecting problems.
Yeah, but my point, the reason why Martin is raising that with me is because I'm talking about racial inequality and I'm talking about white supremacy. He's talking about classism. He's talking about that difference, the fact that the poverty line. I am trying to explain to him that black people also exist there. I am not taking away from the lived experiences of the white boys. I'm not taking away from that. I'm saying that the reason they're where they are is not because of the color of their skin. After all, you do have black people who are working class, who live on council estates, who are fighting just as hard, if not harder, because of the intersecting inequalities they experience.
I'm loving this discussion, but I just want to get another call. Storm.
We're going to speak to Susan now from Dorset, who says her family faced racism from both black and white people.
You probably need to say more about your family, Susan, to help us understand that.
I was married in 1972 to a Trinidadian, and we both experienced racism from both sides, his family and my family and friends. And I have two sons, 45 and 46, and they have dealt with that. And this sort of stupidness only brings this all up. I've lived with this a long time.
But so I suppose I'm not trying to answer for Dr. Shola here, but of course talking about it is quite good for us normally. But you think it's better?
I do understand that, but do not imagine that she's just come against something new. This has been going on a long time, but it is both sides. The Race Relations Board was set up for people from the black community or the white community to be able to report things that have been said to them. I actually don't know whether I've ever heard of any white person going to the Race Relations Board.
Okay.
And yet it is set up for both sides.
Right. Thank you. So you obviously think things are getting better, right? Is that the thrust of it, Susan?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.